We are holding on Daf Daled Amud Aleph, page 4, side A.
Oh, baby.
Baby,
Come on,
no
baby,
crying.
baby.
I'm going to mute everyone. The Gemara of yesterday, we learned about David HaMelech asking always his Rebbe, Mephibosheth, before he gave about any psak that he gave, to make sure that it's correct. And I saw in some of the commentaries, one of the commentaries mentions that he didn't just come to Mephibosheth after his weeks psakim and go check everything out and find out, if he made any mistakes and try to work backwards. Before he gave the psak, he always checked it, and then he gave the psak, which I must say is a little embarrassing, because if you always have to say, well, I don't know the answer, I have to let me speak to someone else. It's probably embarrassing for Rav, especially for David HaMelech, and yet he humbled himself, beforehand. Normally, you would think he probably, gave them an answer, and if there was ever an issue, he would try to get back to them as soon as possible. That I just found some other issue, and there was some other Gemara that doesn't seem to flow with this, But according to one of the commentaries, he says David HaMelech would never give a straight answer, I guess, on anything that was not 100% clear in Torah. He would always ask beforehand, and because of that, it says he merited to have halacha k'maisai. So that's one thing. I know, Manny, you were going to look into if Mephibosheth or was one of those one of the seven family members of Shaul. Were you able to look into that?
What, can you hear me?
Yes.
So what I found was that Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan.
Right.
Of course, Jonathan and his father were killed by the Philistine in an attack, he was Mephibosheth was lame apparently for the rest of his life. He was dropped by his nanny during the coup that was attempted, apparently it gave him a permanent injury as an infant, and that's how he grew up. But David HaMelech seemed to have Rahmanas on him and raised him in his palace, where he resided. It might have been also, the expression, but since he was a descendant of Shaul, he would always have been a threat to come back to the throne, or at least be a principal supported by Shaul's supporters. So the adage of keep your friends close, your enemies closer, he kept him in the palace. That's all I found.
Right.
I didn't find it was part of the seven.
Right. I wonder if all the names are mentioned. I guess we should. Okay. I guess that will be our next project, to look into if all those seven names are mentioned, maybe in the Medrash or possibly even in the Tanakh. But that is interesting, and I'm wondering if
David was a very astute politician. Outside of what it said in the Tanakh, the seven people that were hung as capital punishment were all descendants of Shaul and would have been rivals to the throne.
Right. It's interesting that you say that. I actually disagree with you, but that's not because I have so much more knowledge in Tanakh, but just from the fact that David HaMelech was the epitome of humility, and he was, in a certain sense, not afraid of someone else. If someone else was better than him, and should have been, the leader, he didn't really follow that logic that Shaul HaMelech, we kept finding that Shaul was so nervous that David was taking away the throne. It seemed, I don't know if you find that much by David. You find that all throughout Shaul's description in Tanakh, that Shaul was constantly paranoid. I don't think we find that once about David. We don't see him so paranoid at all. And therefore, I don't think, I know it sounds interesting that he had these 7 members hung, but at the same time, he had them hung against his will. He really did not want, he wanted the Gevonim to forgive, and he didn't want to hang any of the members of Shaul's family.
I think, but I remember that there's some criticism of that, because that's not halakha. It's not halakha to parade. I mean, they had no trial. I understand it was basically a summary execution.
But the point is, the point that I'm making is that he didn't really want to do that execution, and that whether he was wrong or not wrong for doing it, it was not his initial interest. And I think that sort of proves it. And then the fact that he brought Mephibosheth into his, into his palace and helped him, I believe it's because of his friendship with Yonatan. And he felt such a love, wanted to help out the family of Shaul, never wanted to hurt them in any shape or form. To the extent that it's possible that this Mephibosheth, he would ask halachic shilas to. In other words, if he was paranoid from this great Rav, he would probably not be asking him. He would pick someone else, not someone who if he was nervous, he's going to take over. Asking him too many shilas would give him too much potential to be, to show his ignorance. You know what I mean? It just seems like, in any event, it's just a thought. I'm just, again, you have your thought about, political, the history of Jewish politics. But I'm just saying my thought about David is absolutely the opposite. But in any event, I think the point that I think is interesting that you mentioned is that we did say there are 2 opinions about who this Mephibosheth is. It's either Shaul's son or Shaul's grandson. If it's Shaul's grandson, like you're saying, and David HaMelech brought him up in the palace, it does seem a little surprising that he became such a big Rav that David would ask him advice. He was so young. So therefore, it's possible that's why the other opinion says we're referring to a different individual, not the grandson, but the son of Shaul, who was not called Ishbosheth, but was called Ishbaal. And that's why maybe there's that other opinion, because just practically, does it make sense that this grandson of Shaul, who David HaMelech brought up, possibly reached such heights in David HaMelech's lifetime. So that's just a thought based on what you said. So that's the first point of Gemara that we mentioned. Then we spoke about the idea of Shema Yigraim Hachet, that possibly you could lose out in a promise from Hashem if you sin. And that itself is a very interesting topic, because normally we think if Hashem made a promise, it should be automatic. And here we're finding that there is a idea that possible Yigraim Hachet. As Hashem promised Yaakov that he's I'm going to watch you, protect you, whatever you do. And still Yaakov is a wreck. He's nervous because of Esau. And the same thing with David HaMelech here. We find that because of the dots over the word lule, therefore the Gemara understands that he wasn't even sure he was getting Olam Haba in the reward. And that seems surprising that he would have had such a concern if at another point he said chasidam. And the Gemara says the same thing, that Shema Yigrem Hachet. So there are the commentaries do discuss this, and they also find that there is a place where it says Hashem doesn't take back a decree when it's for the good. Once there's a decree for the good, Hashem never takes it back. So how do you fit that with the idea of Shema Yigrem Hachet? It would seem like if a person sins, Hashem can take back his good decrees. And on this, the commentaries there are 2 points that they make. One of them is that a decree for Klal Yisrael, Hashem never, a good decree for Klal Yisrael, a good prophecy for Klal Yisrael will never be taken back, which means even if they sin. But if it's for an individual, that's another story. And the other idea that they mention is if it's clear, if it's an unclear and a vague statement, then it could manifest itself in different ways. If it's clear, that's when it's a problem that Hashem can't it's good for us. Hashem can't take it back. So those are the two ideas. Anyway, so that basically goes over the Gemara that we mentioned yesterday, and we concluded this point that in the days of Ezra, which means when we rebuilt the Beis Hamikdash after the story of Purim, the second Beis Hamikdash, when we rebuilt it, we really should have merited to have great miracles, just like we had when Yeshua came to Eretz Yisrael and won so many wars with miraculous ways, and the entire entrance into Eretz Yisrael, everything came with great miracles. And the reason we didn't merit it in the Beis Hamikdash, by the second Beis Hamikdash, was because of Garam Hachet. We did not deserve it. We had sins. And there is a Rashi, I believe, in Sanhedrin that mentions, let me just pull it up here. Rashi says, because of the sins of the Bayis Rishon, during the whole time of the first Beis Hamikdash, all of those sins, it caused that whenever we do return, it will not be with our own power, but we'll have to get permission. This is a Rashi in Sanhedrin and in Saita.
Rabbi Smith?
Yes.
So I just want to throw out a tidbit of history because Edom is represented by Rome in our Masorah. So the emperor, in Latin it's Iulian, he gave permission for the Jews to rebuild the second temple, to rebuild the third temple. Excuse me. But he wasn't in office for more than a few months because he was actually poisoned. But from the standpoint of Edom, we already have permission to rebuild the third temple.
Interesting, very interesting.
And the other thing is, I noticed that we probably could start the rebuilding of the third temple now, because on the the southwest corner, I think, is where the location of the Robinson Arch. It's referred to as the Robinson Arch. It was a pathway to go up to the temple that was used by pilgrims on visitation. So at the bottom of at the very bottom of that arch, is a mikveh that was used. If that mikveh was put back into functioning and attached to the wall, technically that's a rebuilding of that would be started of the third temple, and we wouldn't need permission from anybody.
And we wouldn't need permission because?
We wouldn't need permission because it's in our hands.
That part of it, right?
Yes.
Right.
Just a
Right.
thought.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. We're going to continue. We're on the bottom of page Dalet Amud Aleph, page 4, side A, the bottom, the two dots, second to bottom line. And the rabbis say until midnight is when you can recite the Shema. And the Gemara is going to ask, what do the rabbis really hold? How do they translate the word in the Shema, uveshachbecha? Do they translate it like Rabbi Eliezer, or do they translate it like Rabbi Gamliel? Which means that the Gemara understands the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, which is that you're supposed to recite the Shema when people go to sleep. And Rabbi Eliezer says it's within a period of 4 hours, people go to sleep. Between when the sun sets or the stars come out until 4 hours later, that's when people go to sleep. And Rabbi Gamliel says it's as long as people are sleeping, which is throughout the entire night, until dawn or until sunrise, basically until the morning. I'm sorry, not until dawn, until sunrise, until dawn. So it's until dawn, according to Rabbi Gamliel, is when people are sleeping. The question is, the rabbis say until midnight. The Gemara here wants to figure out, what do they really hold? You know, how do they understand the pasuk? So the Gemara says in the bottom line, Chachamim kaman sfiralu. Chachamim, who do they hold like in their translation of the word b'shachbecha, when you lie? Ika Rabbi Eliezer sfiralu. If they hold like Rabbi Eliezer, which means when people go to sleep, Leimru, let them say to Rabbi Eliezer, like Rabbi Eliezer. And Rashi says, because whoever is planning on going to sleep has already gone to sleep by the 4th hour of the night. In other words, people who stay up all night, they're staying up. But the people who plan on going to sleep at night, they would obviously go to sleep within those 4 hours. It's an interesting term, Rashi says. I'm just mentioning it because I'm surprised he uses those words. Whoever is going to sleep will go to sleep by the 4th hour. I would say majority. I would think Rashi would use the term majority of people go to sleep within the 4 hours. I can't really understand why Rashi specifically uses those terms, but Rashi I guess Rashi is trying to figure out, why is 4 hours much more logical than midnight? And Rashi, I guess, just says that, that whoever is going to sleep goes to sleep by 4 hours. And that's why the Gemara thinks it's surprising the rabbis would say until midnight, because 4 hours would be, okay, I guess 4 hours would be the more practical time that people are going to sleep, if they're going to be going to sleep. Okay, and then the Gemara continues on the next page. We now turn the page. The Rabban Gamliel Sfiralahu, and if the rabbis hold like Rabbi Gamliel, that b'shachbecha means as long as people are sleeping, and Leimru Rabban Gamliel, let them say like Rabban Gamliel until dawn. So the Gemara answers, Li'olam Rabban Gamliel Sfiralahu. Really, they hold like Rabban Gamliel. Vaha, in this, the Ka'amri ad Chatzois, that they say until Chatzois, Kidei, it's in order, Laharchek Yasa Adam Minhu Avera, to make a person far from sin. So that's the way the Gemara answers the question. We had a question, and the Gemara answers a question of who do they really hold like? They hold like Rabbi Gamliel because it's kadei, it's in order laharchik ha'adam and avera to bring a person far from sinning, and therefore they should let you go until dawn, but according to the translation of the pasuk. But because they don't want you to sin, they give you until midnight. Now, the question on this Gemara is a little obvious. What did the Gemara answer that we didn't know from the Mishnah? The Mishnah also said those words when we started 3 weeks ago, when we learned the Mishnah. We said in the end of the Mishnah, Kedei laharchikas adam and avera. So how is this Gemara adding anything from what what was our question then? We sort of knew that the reason of the rabbis is Kedei laharchikas adam minho avera, and to make it hard, make it far, to make people far from sin, and therefore the rabbis said midnight. So what did this Gemara really help us? And what was the question that we had? So the way the way our Gemara seems to be understanding the Mishnah is that the Mishnah said a story of Rabbi Gamliel. And Rabbi Gamliel claimed that the reason for the rabbis was Kedei laharchik es adam min ha'avera. He was explaining the opinion of the rabbis. The question is, do the rabbis really, is that really the opinion of the rabbis, or did the rabbis maybe, is that what he understood to be their opinion, but maybe they really felt that that wasn't the reason? Maybe they really felt that midnight was a absolute time, and that's when people stopped going to sleep. Maybe that's what they felt. They had or maybe they had a different translation of when what b'shachbacha, when you lie down, means. So even though the story in the Mishnah was about the children of Rabbi Gamliel coming back from a wedding, and it was after midnight, and they asked Rabbi Gamliel, their father, can we still say Shema? And he told them, yes, you still say Shema, because the whole opinion of the rabbis is only in order to bring people far from sin. So that was Rabbi Gamliel's understanding of the rabbi's view. But the Gemara here is trying to figure out if maybe there are different opinions of what the rabbi's view was. Maybe the rabbi's view, at least according to others, maybe was that he understood the word, that they understood the meaning of the pasuk differently. So our Gemara sort of confirms that Rabbi Gamliel's understanding was the correct understanding of the rabbis. And now the Gemara continues, and it brings a brisa. And we're now 4 lines from the top of the page on Dalid Amud Beis, page 4, side B. Kidatanya, as we learned in a brisa, Chachamim asu siyag l'devrehim. The rabbis made a fence for their words. Kedei, in order, shelo yehei adam, that a person will not ba min hasada, come from the field, ba erev, in the evening, va'omer, and he'll say, when he comes from the field, he's going to say, Elech levesi, I'm going to go to my house, v'yoichel kima, and I will eat a little, v'yeshte kima, and I will drink a little, v'ishon kima, and I will sleep a little, v'yacher kach ekra Kriya Shema, and afterwards I will read Kriya Shema v'espalel, and I'll daven. So this brisa is telling us the rabbis made a fence so that a person will not come from the field and say, you know what, I'm going to eat a little, drink a little, sleep a little, and then I'll say Kriya Shema and daven. V'chaytafto shina, and sleep will overtake him, excuse me. V'nimtza, and it'll come out, yashen kol halayla. He will end up sleeping all night. So the rabbis made a fence in order that this doesn't happen. Aval, but Adam ba min asada, person will come from the field, ba'erev, in the evening, nichnas lebeis haknesses, he will enter the shul, imragel likrois koirei, if he's used to reading Chumash, he will read and study Chumash. V'imragel lishnois, if he's used to studying Mishnah, Shoina, he will learn Mishnah. V'koirei Kriya Shema, and he will read Kriya Shema, umispalel, and daven. V'yoichel pitoi, and he will eat his bread, umavarech, and he will say the bracha after his meal. So, v'chol ha'over al divrei chachamim chayiv misa, and anyone who transgresses the words of the rabbis is punishable by death. So that is the brisa. Now, what is the brisa really saying? It's saying something about rabbis making some type of a decree, a fence, and they don't want that people should be saying, I'll eat, I'll sleep a little, drink a little, and then I will say Shema and end up falling asleep and sleeping all night. Instead, what's going to happen is people will come from the field and they'll go to shul and they'll learn a little, and then they'll say Shema and daven, and then they'll eat. Now, the brisa doesn't really tell us what exactly this decree is. What was the decree? So our Gemara earlier was talking about the decree of Chatzos, that you only have until Chatzos to say Shema. Now, how is that going to help us here? By the fact that they made a decree of until Chatzos, what is that going to do to make people not eat a little, drink a little, and sleep a little, and afterwards they'll fall asleep? In other words, what is the explanation of this brisa? What does this mean? They made this decree and it's going to stop that. So there are commentaries here that want to learn that this decree is not really the same as the decree in our Mishnah. The decree here is possibly that a person should say Shema and daven right away. That's what the decree is. You're really supposed to say Shema and daven right away. And because if you don't, you'll end up possibly falling asleep. So according to that, there is a mitzvah or a rabbinic decree that once the time of Ma'ariv comes, you really should daven. Now, of course, if you in your community they have a minyan, that's later, so that might be a room for leniency to wait for the official minyan that you're used to going to, and so on. But the initial idea of this decree is possibly not connected to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said we have until midnight to say Shema. This brisa is telling us that there's a decree that we have to say Shema and daven, when right at the beginning of night, and that's the preferable time to say Shema. If you missed it, then you have what the Mishnah talks about. If you have till midnight or you have till 4 hours, you have to listen. So that's one way of learning. Another way of learning this is that it's not about, you have to say Shema right away, but it's a decree that you're not allowed to eat anything until you say Shema. You're not allowed to sleep or eat or drink until you say Shema. And even on that, if you learn it this way, are you allowed to take a taste of food and you're just not allowed to have a meal? Or does it mean that you're not even allowed to taste food and have a meal? Because the term used here is, person will say that I'm going to eat a little and I'll drink a little, I'll sleep a little, and then I'll say Shema, which makes it sound that maybe this is the problem, is even a little eating is what the rabbis decreed against. But others don't learn that way. If you look at the top Tosfos, he says, from here it's understood that from the time that the Zman of Shema of night is, a person should not eat a meal until he says Shema. So Tosfos understands that it's not telling you can't eat a little. It's saying that's what people might say. That's the way people talk. I'm just going to eat a little. But really, the problem is that you're not allowed to eat a meal. That's really what the problem is. And because of that, we made a decree, the rabbis made a decree that you're not allowed to eat a meal, and this way, no one's going to end up falling asleep and missing the Shema and davening. Then the more simple explanation of this is that the Brisa is talking about our decree, that it's midnight. The rabbis made a decree that you only have until midnight. Now, if you only have until midnight, this will cause people to realize we don't have such a long time. And because of that, they will rush. They will make sure to not rush, but they will make sure to put a priority on their Shema, on their Shemona Esrei, on davening, and instead of prioritizing their other needs for the night, because it's a limited time. They only have until midnight. It makes them feel more concerned about it, and therefore they make it a priority. And that's what the Brisa is saying, that the rabbis made a decree, they made a siyag, offense to their words, that you only have until midnight. And because of that, a person will end up going to shul and davening and then eating, and then doing whatever else they want.
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, or maybe bring in something I've learned in the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
I believe it says in the Shulchan Aruch that the mitzvah should come first, and then the eating should come after that. Otherwise, you're like throwing, like the Shulchan Aruch wants to suggest, you're throwing Hashem at your back. Or what my love used to say, you're putting your stomach before the Ribono Shel Olam.
Right. So there is a pasuk that it says, Al toichlu al hadam, ki bamen nechshavu, that you shouldn't eat before you daven, and because it's considered like you brought a sacrifice on a bama, which is an altar that's not allowed. And so the Gemara talks about not the prohibition of not eating, the prohibition of eating before davening. And there is, and that is sort of based on this Gemara, that person shouldn't eat, according to the different opinions of how to learn this Gemara, but that would be one of the ideas that this Gemara is bringing out, that wouldn't be allowed to eat before Ma'ariv.
Some people say that one should eat to daven, in order to help enhance your davening. But then that's not the halacha. The halacha is supposed to be the other way around, right?
That's a interesting question that you ask, Jerry. But actually, it is the halacha, because the Shulchan Aruch says that a person who's not well, a choyle, is allowed to eat before davening. And the Shulchan Aruch says right there that if a person is going to be hungry, they are called a choyle. They're called sick. So nowadays, most people are hungry before the end of davening. Not necessarily weekday davening, but possibly weekday davening, and definitely Shabbos davening. There's a lot of, I remember as a kid, we used to be starving before the end of davening, and we were rushing home to make Kiddush. Now, the real truth is that according to halacha, you are allowed to eat before davening if you're going to be hungry. Because if you're hungry, you're called a choyle, and the Shulchan Aruch, and that's what Shulchan Aruch says. And the Shulchan Aruch says that a choyle is allowed to eat before davening. But what's interesting is the Shulchan Aruch says that if you're going to be hungry, you are called a choyle, and you can eat before davening, meaning it's up to you. If you want, you can daven and be hungry, or you can eat before davening. So there is a term used among the Hasidim, and it was, I think, said by possibly the Tzemach Tzedek. He said that we eat in order to daven instead of daven in order to eat. And that term is based on this Shulchan Aruch. In other words, you can't just take that statement and say it. You have to say that statement on the line of what the Shulchan Aruch said, that it's up to you if you want to eat before davening, or if you want, you can eat im yirtzeh. It says if you want, you can eat before davening, or if you want, you can daven before eating. On that line is where the Tzemach Tzedek said, aha. So the Shulchan Aruch says it's up to you. By Chassidim, we eat in order to daven. So that's really what it boils down to, is a person more concerned about following in a certain sense, the letter of the initial law, where initially a person shouldn't eat before davening, or is a person more concerned that their davening should be a real davening? And so by Chassidim, they really put more emphasis on the davening, that the davening should be a more serious davening. And that's why, that's the meaning of that statement. And that is 100% fits with halacha and Shulchan Aruch of the Beis Yosef Shulchan Aruch, the main Shulchan Aruch. That is perfectly in tune with. In any event, we just mentioned this brisa, and the brisa has different ways of understanding it. And the final explanation that I was saying was that this decree that the rabbis made around the decree that the rabbis initiated is that a person will not have a full night to say the Shema. They only have until midnight, and that will cause them to daven first, and then they will be involved in then they will do whatever else they need to do. They want to eat, they want to drink and sleep, and so on. Now, it is interesting that the Shalah HaKadosh brought down in the first Magen Avram, Shulchan Aruch, about how we're supposed to connect the day with the night in learning. Torah is supposed to be used to connect the day. In other words, we're supposed to connect the day with the night through learning Torah. So there is a concept here in this brisa that is, I guess, developed by the Shalah HaKadosh, that he emphasizes this idea that a person should really try to, I guess, the twilight period between day and night and between night and day should be utilized for learning Torah, which fits right with this, which fits right in. This is exactly this brisa that a person should come home and instead of going home, finish work, he's heading home, he should stop in shul and learn before Ma'ariv, because you're connecting the day with the night with learning Torah. Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Rabbi, I just wanted to mention it. I'm glad you mentioned what the Shloach HaKadosh says, because it seems to me that almost the emphasis of the Brisa is about the learning versus about Kriya Shema.
Right.
Is that a correct takeaway from this Brisa?
I mean, you're saying it seems like maybe that's the main point, and that's where the Shalah sees it from. Like that's the main purpose of the brisa. It's a very vague brisa, especially because it doesn't say clearly what we're talking about, what the decree is. So from the get go, it's already a little vague. But it does seem that way, right? The person will. It's like it jumps from talking about eating and davening, it jumps to learning. Like we weren't even talking about learning before, and it jumps right into it. It seems like it's putting the main emphasis on the learning, but that definitely seems like that could be possibly a main point here. But I mean, the problem is that doesn't really fit with the idea of this decree. Like, it seems like there must be some decree here as well that we're talking about. So because of that, you can only say it's really a hint. You can't really say it's the main purpose. Otherwise, it doesn't flow. What is the decree? Did they decree that you have to? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, could that be the decree? Right. Could we say that the decree actually is about learning Torah?
Learning Torah, but the problem is we don't find it. And it also says it's a decree to make a fence. A fence sounds like there's something people are gonna, to their words, offense to their words. I don't know, and it doesn't start off that way. That people aren't going to learn Torah. And it doesn't say you won't learn. It doesn't say it doesn't say and afterwards I'll learn Torah. You know what I mean? Like, so it doesn't. Now, at the same time, it is a brisa. It doesn't have the exactness of a Mishnah. You know what I mean? So, but nevertheless, it's a little hard to say that that's the main purpose of the main point of the brisa. It would also not flow with our Gemara then, because our Gemara obviously understands it differently as well.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, but that's a good point that it does seem to bring that out pretty clearly, more than just a little hint. Yeah. Okay.